respected viewers, beloved seekers of wisdom and truth. There's a number that haunts the quiet hours of middle age. It sits there in the darkness before dawn, when sleep escapes you and the weight of time becomes unbearably real. $500,000. If you're 50 years old and you haven't reached this threshold, I need you to listen to what I'm about to tell you, not with fear, but with the clear-eyed honesty that separates those who transform their lives from those who simply let life happen to them. Let me tell you something that terrifies most people at 50, but liberates the few who truly understand it. You are standing at the edge of a canyon. Behind you, 30 years of work, decisions, sacrifices, and perhaps regrets. Ahead of you, if fortune smiles and health permits, perhaps 20 or 30 more years. But here's the truth that makes comfortable people uncomfortable. Those years ahead will cost more than the years behind. Much, much more. Healthcare doesn't get cheaper with age, my friends. It gets exponentially more expensive. Dignity in old age, it has a price tag. And inflation. Inflation is the silent thief that never sleeps, never rests, never shows mercy to those who ignored its power. I've watched this story unfold 1,000 times over 8 decades of living. Good people, hardworking people, people with noble intentions and kind hearts, reaching their 50s and suddenly realizing that time, which once seemed infinite, has become their scarcest resource. But before terror takes root in your heart, before despair clouds your judgment, let me share something that changed my entire understanding of wealth. I once knew a man, let's call him Robert. Robert was 53 when we met. He had $47,000 to his name. That's all. $47,000 after 3 decades of working. No pension worth mentioning, no real estate, no inheritance coming. Just $47,000 and a crushing awareness that he'd been asleep at the wheel of his own financial life. Most people would have called his situation hopeless. Most financial advisors would have given him the patronizing speech about doing the best you can and enjoying the simple things. But Robert did something different. He didn't panic. He didn't despair. He didn't buy a sports car or take an exotic vacation to enjoy life while he still could. Robert got rational. You see, there's a beautiful irony in hitting rock bottom financially at 50. The same clarity that terrifies you can also liberate you. When you finally see the truth of your situation, when you stop lying to yourself about someday, and eventually, when you accept with brutal honesty where you actually are, that's when transformation becomes possible. Robert made a decision that day. He decided that the next 15 years of his life would be different from the previous 30. Not because he would work harder, but because he would think differently. He started with a simple question that I want you to ask yourself right now. What do I actually need to be secure? Not wealthy, not rich, not living in a mansion or driving a luxury car. Secure, genuinely peacefully secure. For most people, that number is far less terrifying than they imagine. But here's the catch: you have to get honest about 3 things. First, your expenses. Real expenses. Not the life you think you're supposed to live. Not keeping up with neighbors or siblings or college friends. The life you actually need to be content, healthy, and purposeful. Second, your time horizon. At 50, with less than 500 $, you don't have 30 years to let compound interest work its magic. You might have 15 to 20 productive earning years. That's your window. Not a moment to waste on denial or fantasy. Third, your earning power. What can you actually contribute to the world that the world will pay for? Not what you wish you could do. Not what sounds prestigious or impressive. What genuine value can you create? Robert answered these questions with painful honesty. He realized he'd been spending money on a lifestyle that didn't even make him happy. Big house in an expensive neighborhood, because that's what successful people did. New cars every few years because old cars seemed like failure. Dinners out, vacations, gadgets, all purchased not from genuine desire, but from some vague sense of obligation to an image he'd constructed. He downsized everything, sold the house, moved to a smaller place in a less expensive area, bought a reliable used car and decided to drive it until the wheels fell off, cut his monthly expenses by 60%, and discovered something miraculous. He didn't miss any of it. The freedom he gained, the mental space that opened up, the sheer relief of stepping off the treadmill of consumption. It was intoxicating. But cutting expenses was only the beginning. that bought him time, breathing room, but it didn't solve the fundamental problem. At 53 with 47 Ozen, even spending very little, he would run out of money. So Robert did the second thing that changed everything. He became valuable. For 30 years, he'd been a middle manager at a manufacturing company. Competent, reliable, forgettable. He did his job, collected his paycheck, and never thought deeply about what value he actually created. Now, with clarity born of necessity, he looked at his skills differently. He'd spent 3 decades learning about supply chain logistics. He understood manufacturing processes. He knew how to spot inefficiencies and solve problems. Small manufacturing companies, he realized, were drowning in inefficiency. They couldn't afford to hire full-time experts, but they desperately needed someone who could come in, analyze their operations, and find the waste. Robert became a consultant, not with fancy credentials or a graduate degree, just with 30 years of practical experience and a willingness to solve real problems for real companies. His first client paid him 5,000 Ozen for a week of work. He found them 50,000 in annual savings, word spread. Within 2 years, he was earning more than he'd ever made as a middle manager, working fewer hours, with complete control over his time. But here's what made Robert truly wise. He didn't inflate his lifestyle. Every extra dollar, every single dollar above his basic needs went into investments. Not cryptocurrency or penny stocks or his brother-in-law's guaranteed opportunity. Index funds, broad market exposure, low fees. Boring, patient, rational investing. Robert understood something that most 50-year-olds with financial anxiety don't understand. Hey, you can't out-clever the market, but you can out-patience your own impulses. From 53 to 60, 15 years, Robert invested consistently. Some years the market soared. Some years it crashed. He didn't care. He kept investing, kept living below his means, kept creating value for clients who needed his expertise. When he turned 68, do you know what his net worth was? $940,000. Not from luck, not from inheritance, not from some spectacular investment genius, from discipline, rationality, patience, and a willingness to face reality instead of hiding from it. Now, I can hear some of you thinking, but I don't have specialized skills like Robert. I can't become a consultant. My situation is different. You're right, your situation is different. But the principle, the fundamental truth remains the same. At 50 with less than $500, you have exactly 2 paths forward. Path 1, denial. Pretend everything will somehow work out. Hope for lottery wins or inheritances or market miracles. Spend your 50s the same way you spent your 30s and 40s. Reach 65 or 70 and discover with horror that hope is not a strategy. Path 2, rational acceptance. Look at where you are with clear eyes. Cut the waste from your life ruthlessly. Find ways to create genuine value for other people. Invest every spare dollar with patience and discipline. Accept that the next 15 years will require sacrifice, but that sacrifice buys you dignity and security in the years beyond. Most people choose path 1, not because they're stupid or lazy, but because path 2 requires something painful, admitting you were wrong, admitting that the way you've been living, the financial decisions you've been making haven't worked. The ego resists this admission with tremendous force. It whispers, you've worked hard. You deserve to relax now. Life is short, enjoy it. But wisdom, true wisdom, knows that there are 2 kinds of short-term thinking. There's the short-term thinking that enjoys today and suffers tomorrow. And there's the short-term thinking that sacrifices today to ensure tomorrow never becomes suffering. At 50, you're not too old to change, but you're too old to waste time. Every year you spend in denial. Every year you postpone the hard decisions. Every year you choose comfort over discipline. Compounds against you. But here's the beautiful truth that nobody talks about. When you finally make the shift, when you finally embrace rationality over fantasy, something extraordinary happens. The anxiety, that crushing weight that wakes you at 3 in the morning, begins to lift. Not because your bank account suddenly explodes, not because you've won or inherited or stumbled into fortune, but because you've stopped lying to yourself. And there is profound, almost spiritual peace in living aligned with reality. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Margaret. Margaret was 51 when her husband left. Divorced after 26 years of marriage. He was the primary earner. She'd work part-time, raised the children, managed the household. The divorce settlement gave her 180 Zollos, earning half the proceeds from selling their home, about $90,000 after splitting the equity. $275,000 at 51. No career to speak of, no recent work experience. 2 kids still in college. She came to me not for advice, really, but for permission to panic. She wanted someone to confirm that, yes, her situation was hopeless. Yes, she'd been abandoned and betrayed. Yes, life was unfair and she was a victim. I didn't give her that permission. Instead, I asked her a question. What are you good at? She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. I'm good at being a wife and mother. She said bitterly, neither of which pays particularly well. No, I said. What are you actually good at? What have you spent 26 years doing every single day? She thought about it. I managed our household, she said slowly. Budgeted, organized, kept track of appointments and schedules and bills, made sure nothing fell through the cracks. And were you good at it? I was excellent at it, she said, and for the first time, I saw something other than despair in her eyes. Pride, recognition of her own competence. Then you're not unemployed, I told her. You're a household operations specialist who's been working for free. That reframe, that simple shift in perspective, changed everything. Margaret started offering her services to busy professionals, doctors, lawyers, executives, people drowning in the chaos of trying to balance demanding careers with household management. She organized their lives, set up systems, managed contractors, handled bills and schedules and all the invisible work that keeps a household functioning. She charged $50 an hour, worked 5 hours a week, made $65,000 a year while having complete flexibility to still be present for her college-aged children. But more importantly, she invested. Every dollar she didn't need for basic expenses went into a diversified portfolio. She lived in a modest apartment, drove a 10-year-old car, spent money only on what genuinely mattered to her well-being. The divorce that seemed like financial catastrophe became the wake-up call that transformed her life. At 66, 15 years after that divorce, Margaret had over $700,000. She'd built Social Security credits from her own work. She'd proven to herself that she was capable, valuable, and resilient. But here's what matters most about Margaret's story. She didn't need a miracle. She didn't need the market to do anything extraordinary. She didn't need to take wild risks or make brilliant predictions about which stocks would soar. She needed clarity, discipline, and patience. The same 3 things Robert needed. The same 3 things anyone standing at 50 with less than 500,000 needs. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking about all the reasons why their stories can't be your story. All the ways your situation is uniquely difficult or complicated or impossible. Maybe you have health issues. Maybe you're caring for aging parents. Maybe you live in an expensive area and can't just pick up and move. Maybe you have crushing debt that makes saving seem impossible. I understand. I truly do. Life is not fair. Circumstances are not equal. Some people face mountains that others never have to climb. But here's the unforgiving truth that I need you to hear. Your circumstances don't care about your excuses. Reality doesn't negotiate. Time doesn't grant extensions because your situation is difficult. You can spend the next 15 years explaining why you couldn't save, couldn't invest, couldn't change, and at 65, you'll be exactly where those explanations lead, broke, dependent, and out of options. Or you can spend the next 15 years doing whatever is actually possible within your actual circumstances. And at 65, you'll be somewhere better than where you are today. Not perfect, maybe not even comfortable, but better, measurably, tangibly better. I've lived long enough to watch both paths unfold hundreds of times. And I can tell you with absolute certainty the second path, even when it's harder, even when it requires sacrifice, even when progress feels painfully slow, leads to more dignity, more peace, and more security than the first path ever does. Let me tell you about Tom. Tom was 54 when I met him. Type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, overweight. He'd worked in retail management his entire life, decent income, but nothing spectacular. He had about $120,000 in retirement savings and roughly $40,000 in credit card debt from various emergencies and poor decisions over the years. His health problems meant higher insurance costs, more medical bills, medications. He was tired, deeply tired, in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. Tom could have given up. His health alone seemed like a valid reason to say, "I've worked hard enough. I deserve to take it easy now." But Tom did something interesting. He started connecting dots that most people never connect. His financial stress, his health problems, his exhaustion, they weren't separate issues. They were interconnected parts of the same system, a system that wasn't working. He realized that his poor health was costing him thousands of dollars a year in medical expenses, that his low energy made him less effective at work, limiting his earning potential, that his financial anxiety was literally making him sick, raising his blood pressure, disrupting his sleep, driving stress eating. So Tom made a radical decision. He decided to treat his health as a financial investment. He started walking. Nothing extreme, just 30 minutes a day. Then he cleaned up his diet, not with some expensive meal plan or exotic superfoods, but by cooking simple, whole foods at home instead of eating processed convenience food. Within 6 months, his blood sugar stabilized. His blood pressure came down. He lost 40 pounds. His doctor reduced his medications. His health care costs dropped by $400 a month. $400. That's $800 a year. Over 15 years, that's over $70,000 in savings just from taking care of his body. But the benefits went beyond just saving money on health care. Tom had more energy, more clarity, more confidence. He asked for and received a promotion at work. His income increased by $12,000 a year. He used the combination of reduced health expenses and increased income to attack his credit card debt aggressively. Within 3 years, the debt was gone. Every dollar that had been going to interest payments, every dollar that had been maintaining debt, started going into investments instead. Tom's story illustrates something crucial that most financial advice completely misses. Your life is a system. Your health affects your wealth. Your relationships affect your decision making. Your mindset affects your behavior. You cannot fix your finances without addressing the whole system. And sometimes, often, the most powerful financial decision you can make has nothing to do with money directly. Getting healthy, fixing broken relationships, developing skills, building discipline, clearing mental clutter. These aren't separate from your financial life. They are your financial life. At 50 with less than $500, you don't have the luxury of compartmentalizing anymore. You can't say, "I'll deal with my health later," or "I'll work on my skills someday." Later is now. Someday is today. But here's what gives me hope, what should give you hope. Human nature is remarkably adaptable. We can tolerate almost anything when we stop resisting it and start working with it. The 50-year-old who accepts their situation and commits to improvement, even small, incremental improvement, can accomplish extraordinary things. I've seen people completely transform their financial trajectories in their 50s and 60s, not through miracles, but through sustained, rational effort. The question isn't whether transformation is possible. The question is whether you're willing to embrace the discomfort that transformation requires. Because make no mistake, it will be uncomfortable. Downsizing your lifestyle is uncomfortable. Learning new skills at 50 is uncomfortable. Watching peers take vacations while you stay home and invest is uncomfortable. Saying no to social pressure and family expectations is uncomfortable. But you know what else is uncomfortable? Running out of money at 75. Being dependent on your children. Having no options. Living with the regret of wasted years when you absolutely knew, that you should have acted differently. Choose your discomfort, because discomfort is coming either way. I choose the discomfort of discipline over the discomfort of regret. Every time, without exception. And here's something else I've learned in 8 decades of watching human behavior. The people who transform their lives in their 50s don't do it through willpower alone. Willpower is a finite resource. It depletes. It fails you precisely when you need it most. No, the people who actually change, who actually build security from seemingly impossible situations, they change their environment. They change their associations. They change the very structure of their daily lives. Let me tell you about a couple I knew, David and Susan. They were both 50, too, when they finally looked at their financial situation honestly. Combined retirement savings of $215,000, a mortgage they'd refinanced twice to pull out equity, car payments, credit cards. The full catastrophe of American middle-class financial dysfunction. They sat down one evening and did something most couples never do. They asked each other, what do we actually want from the rest of our lives? not what they were supposed to want, not what would impress their friends or satisfy their parents' expectations. What did they, in their deepest, most honest selves, actually want? The answer surprised them both. They wanted time together. They wanted freedom from constant financial stress. They wanted to wake up without dread. They wanted to help their grandchildren someday without being a burden to their own children. They didn't want a big house. They didn't want expensive cars or exotic vacations or designer anything. Those things had never brought them real joy anyway, just temporary distraction from a nagging sense that something was wrong. So they made a plan that their friends and family thought was insane. They sold their house, paid off all their debts, bought a small RV and started living on the road, working remotely house sitting, picking up short-term gigs in different locations. Their living expenses dropped from $6,500 a month to $200 a month. They were able to save and invest over $50,000 a year money they'd never been able to accumulate before, because it had been going to mortgage interest, property taxes, maintenance, and all the costs of maintaining a lifestyle they didn't even enjoy. But more than the money, they found something priceless. Freedom, presence, a life that felt like theirs, not a life they were living for someone else's approval. Were there challenges? Of course. Learning to live in a small space required adjustment. Not everyone understood their choices. Some people thought they'd given up or failed. But David and Susan knew something their critics didn't. There's no failure in choosing a life that actually makes you happy. The only failure is spending decades pursuing a version of success that leaves you empty, anxious, and broke. At 60, 15 years into their new life, they had $6 at $80,000 in investments and zero debt. More importantly, they'd spent 15 years actually living present, engaged free instead of postponing life until some mythical retirement that might never come. Their story reveals something profound about the relationship between money and meaning. Money is not the goal. Security is not the goal. These are tools, means to an end. The goal is a life well lived, a life of purpose, peace, and presence. But here's the paradox that confuses so many people. You can't have genuine peace without genuine security. Financial anxiety corrodes everything it touches. It ruins relationships. It destroys health. It makes presence impossible because your mind is always churning with worry about tomorrow. So you need security, but not for its own sake. You need security so you can stop thinking about security. You need enough so that enough stops dominating your thoughts and you can focus on what actually matters. At 50 with less than 500 zosin, you're in a dangerous zone. You have enough to feel like maybe things will work out, but not enough to actually be secure. This false comfort, this middle ground, is where dreams go to die. You need to get honest about which side of the line you're on. Are you secure or aren't you? And if you're not, what are you willing to do about it? Because I promise you, I absolutely promise you, doing nothing is a decision. Hoping is a decision. Waiting for circumstances to change is a decision. And those decisions have consequences that compound just as surely as investment returns compound. Every year you delay, the math gets harder. Not impossible, but harder. At 50 with 200 zalosin, you can still build security if you're willing to save aggressively. At 60 with 200,000, the window is closing. At 70 with 200 zalosin, you're no longer building security. You're managing decline. Time is the one asset you cannot buy, borrow, or recover. And at 50, time is more valuable than money. So let me ask you something directly. No platitudes. No gentle encouragement. Just a direct question that demands a direct answer. What are you going to do differently tomorrow than you did today? Not someday. Not when circumstances are perfect. Tomorrow, what specific action will you take? Because here's what I've learned watching thousands of people navigate financial challenges over decades. The ones who make it, the ones who transform seemingly hopeless situations into security and peace, they all share one characteristic. They act. They don't just think about acting. They don't just plan to act, they act. Small actions, unglamorous actions, actions that nobody applauds or notices. They make a budget. They call a credit card company to negotiate a rate. They sell something they don't need. They apply for a better job. They learn a new skill. They have an uncomfortable conversation with a spouse about spending. They do something, anything, today, and then tomorrow they do something else, and the next day, something else. not because any single action is transformative, but because 1,000 small actions over 1,000 days becomes a different life. I've been blessed to live a long time, long enough to see the full arc of many lives, long enough to know what separates those who thrive from those who merely survive. It's not intelligence. Some of the smartest people I've known died broke and bitter. It's not opportunity. Some people born with every advantage squandered it all. It's not even luck, though luck certainly plays a role. What separates them is this: the willingness to face reality clearly and respond to it rationally, even when that response requires sacrifice, discomfort, and going against social pressure. The willingness to say, this is where I am, not where I wish I was, not where I should be, where I am. And from here, from this exact spot, I will move forward. At 50 with less than 500 Zozerd, you are standing at a crossroads. One path leads to increasing anxiety, dependence, and regret. The other path leads to increasing security, dignity, and peace. The second path requires more from you, more honesty, more discipline, more sacrifice in the near term. But I can tell you from decades of observation, it leads to a far better destination. You have perhaps 15 to 20 productive years remaining. Maybe more if you're fortunate, maybe less if you're not. But whatever time you have, it's enough. Enough to change your trajectory, enough to build security, enough to ensure that your later years are characterized by dignity rather than desperation. But only if you start, only if you act, only if you trade comfortable delusion for uncomfortable truth. I won't lie to you and say it will be easy. I won't promise you'll end up wealthy or that you'll never worry about money again. Life doesn't come with those guarantees. But I will promise you this: if you commit to living rationally, spending wisely, investing patiently, and creating value genuinely, you will be more secure at 65 than you are today. Measurably, tangibly more secure. And that security, that knowledge that you did what you could with what you had, brings a peace that no amount of consumption or denial can provide. The terror you might feel right now, looking at your age and your savings and feeling the weight of time running out, that terror is a gift. Not a comfortable gift, not a welcome gift, but a gift nonetheless. It's reality breaking through denial. It's truth cutting through comfortable lies. It's the opportunity to change before it's too late. Most people never get this wake-up call. They drift through their 50s and 60s, vaguely anxious but never quite facing the truth, until suddenly they're 75 and out of options. You're getting the call now. While there's still time, while action can still make a difference. The question is, will you answer it? The sun rises whether you acknowledge it or not. The tide comes in whether you prepare for it or not. And time moves forward whether you use it wisely or squander it in fear. I've spent my life studying human behavior markets and the intersection between wisdom and wealth. And if there's one truth I've learned that towers above all others, it's this: your financial life is not separate from your inner life. They are mirrors of each other. The person who cannot face difficult truths about themselves cannot face difficult truths about their bank account. The person who lacks discipline in their thinking lacks discipline in their spending. The person who lives in fantasy rather than reality finds themselves broke in a world that runs on facts, not wishes. But the inverse is equally true. The person who cultivates clarity of thought finds clarity in their finances. The person who develops patience in their character develops patience in their investing. The person who accepts reality as it is, not as they wish it to be, finds pathways forward that others lost in denial never see. At 50 with less than 500 Zolozin, you're being given a chance that many never receive. The chance to wake up while there's still daylight. The chance to change course while the harbor is still reachable. The chance to build something real instead of continuing to chase something imaginary. This isn't about becoming rich. Let go of that fantasy if you're holding it. This is about becoming secure, about ensuring that your later years are lived with dignity, about not being a burden to those you love, about being able to look yourself in the mirror at 75 and say, I did what I could. I faced the truth. I made hard choices. I have no regrets. That peace, that deep soul-level peace that comes from living with integrity and rationality, is worth more than any mansion, any luxury car. Any impression you might make on people whose opinions don't matter. Robert with his 47 Nolausen O, Margaret with her divorce settlement, Tom with his health problems, David and Susan in their RV, none of them started from positions of strength. All of them faced circumstances that would justify giving up. But they didn't give up. They got rational. They got disciplined. They got honest. And they built lives of security and meaning from what looked like failure and insufficiency. You can do the same, not through miracles, not through luck, through choice, through daily choices that align with reality rather than fantasy. Cut what doesn't serve you. Invest what you save. Create value for others. Be patient with time. Be honest with yourself. Be disciplined with your impulses. Do this consistently for the next 15 years, and I promise you'll arrive at 60, 5 in a different place than where fear says you'll end up. Will it be perfect? No. Will you have everything you once dreamed of? Probably not. But you'll have something more valuable than dreams. You'll have security. You'll have dignity. You'll have the peace that comes from knowing you did your best with what you had. And in the end, when you're looking back on these years, that's what matters. Not how much you accumulated, but whether you lived with wisdom, courage, and integrity. The number, that $500, and it's not actually about the money. It's about what the money represents. Preparation, responsibility, the willingness to delay gratification, the courage to face difficulty now so that later years can be peaceful. If you're 50 and below the threshold, don't let terror paralyze you. Let it motivate you. Let it wake you up. Let it be the beginning of your financial transformation rather than the confirmation of your financial defeat. You have time, not infinite time, not comfortable time, but enough time. Use it wisely. Live below your means. Invest the difference. Create value. Be patient. Stay rational. And 15 years from now, when you're 65 and secure, you'll look back on this moment, this exact moment when you felt terrified, and you'll be grateful. Grateful that the fear came when it did. Grateful that you listened. Grateful that you acted. That gratitude, that peace, that security, it's waiting for you. Not in some distant, impossible future, but at the end of a path you can start walking today. Right now. This moment you can begin. The only question is, will you?